For most of us who sew our own clothes, basic garment repairs are not often a huge challenge. However, encountering knit items that are thinning or have holes, that can feel like a whole other ball game, especially if you're not a knitter. In this episode, professional repairer, educator and author Skye Pennant teaches us our scotch darn from our honeycomb darn and shares her sometimes controversial opinions about the best type of threads to use for mending. Stick around a few minutes and we'll get into it. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises. And I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me on this journey. How are you doing, lovely listener? Thanks so much for pressing play on this episode. I promise you there's lots of helpful advice on the way. Have you had any sustainability wins this week? So I'm riding high on a sustainability win and budget win that I just had. So at the moment, we're having some building work done in our attic to turn our little 2-bed, 1-bathroom house into a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house so that our kids don't have to share a bedroom anymore. And of course, this means we're going to need more furniture. Well, we've been looking online at different types of beds that might work for our kids. And my big kids saw a bed that they liked from IKEA, which was £300. Anyway, after school on Friday, we popped up to Emmaus, that is a short walk from my kids' school. Emmaus, for those who don't know, is like a large chain of charity shops that started in France after the Second World War. They often are really big and they often have furniture and all sorts of homeware stuff. Anyway, we found the exact bed from IKEA that my big kid wanted for £90 and it's going to be delivered in a couple of weeks. So that is a reminder to myself and everyone else. Just see if you can get what you want or something similar to what you want secondhand first. It keeps existing resources in use for longer, it prevents the demand for use and extraction of new resources, and it can often save you money. So this week, I want to say huge thanks to Fran and Catherine for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon. And also huge thanks to existing patron Kat for upping the amount of their support. I'm so grateful. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, if you like the conversations we have and appreciate the topics we explore, please consider helping me make it possible. This podcast is solely funded through Patreon, so every sign up really makes a direct and big difference to my ability to spend the time making Check Your Thread. Please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to see what's going on over there, and you can sign up for any amount that makes sense for you. Okay, right, let's get into it. This is the second half of my conversation with Skye Pennant from Slow Stitch Club. If you didn't hear last week's episode, you can get to know more about Skye in episode 184. But you don't necessarily need to have heard that one before today's, because this is all about practical mending advice. So thank you so much to the Check Your Thread patrons who submitted awesome questions to ask Skye. You came up with some really amazing ones, and I hope that the responses help you all on your mending journeys. As always, lots of links and some photos in the show notes that you can find on checkyourthread.com, including pics of the socks that I mended thanks to Skye's advice that she gave me in this conversation. I also want to draw attention to both Skye's excellent YouTube channel, where she shows mending techniques really clearly, and also the Slow Stitch Club Patreon, where you can support the amazing work that Skye does. Links to both of those are in the show notes. So until next week, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and the wider global community. Hit up your local furniture charity shop or thrift store before heading to IKEA, and enjoy. Hello, you okay?
Yes.
Look at your cute jumper. Is that a Merchant & Mills jumper?
Yeah, so I've had this, I was trying to work this out this morning, I think maybe about 12, 13 years.
Yay! Have you had to mend it?
I actually, when I put it on this morning, noticed that the cuff needs mending, but that will be the first one. So.
Okay, so back to your book, Well Worn. So obviously there are tons of mending books already out there, but what I think sets yours apart is that it's really comprehensive. It covers how to mend the most commonly found. I'm sure this was not a surprise to you, and I'm sure this is not an accident, but it covers like the most kind of commonly found garments in people's wardrobes. But it's also been like photographed and illustrated really beautifully, so you kind of want to pick it up and flick through it, but also the techniques are shown like really clearly, so it'd be easy for someone, even if they're pretty new to sewing, like to follow along and have a stab. But my favourite bit is the chart that you've made that so clearly shows like which techniques are going to be suitable for which garment malfunction. That is such a clever idea, and it's not something I've seen before. So where did the idea for that come?
So it's really funny. I get so many messages about that chart, and it worries me a bit because I haven't looked at it since I again got this like perfectionist fear of thinking maybe I didn't cross the right sections. So, as I said, I'm a terrible cook. Cannot cook to save my life. Find cookbooks really frustrating. They are not designed for my brain. But one of my partner's favourite cookbooks is by Anna Jones. And she has this chart in there, and it's like a mind map chart, flow chart thing of mixing together different ingredients and where they would be applicable and how to make certain meals from them. And it was a really weird way for my brain to connect to that, but I just thought, oh, isn't that clever? She's made this chart that basically shows where different vegetables or whatever will be applicable to different recipes. That's where that idea came from.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I just thought it's really nice to hear, by the way, that you think it is comprehensive like that, because that's what I wanted. But I think what a lot of people can still come across and face is that they could pick up a book, learn all these different techniques, but if they're only learning them to mend that one specific garment, how are they to know that they could then go away and use it on a different garment?
Yes.
And I think that was it. I just wanted people to say, okay, well, I've just darned a sock like you did in that chapter, but where else can I do that? And I think I just wanted to make it clear that you can, cross-reference all of those techniques.
It's not like right now I have to start completely from scratch again because now there's a hole in my jeans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I just wanted people to really understand how many different ways mending can be used across different garments.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why my favourite mending technique is patching, because, I mean, when a lot of other things fail, stick a patch on it.
Stick a patch on it. I know, absolutely. Yeah.
So what was your mindset going into the book? It sounds like something that you started and kind of it didn't quite happen a number of times. And as someone who already shares so much mending knowledge through your YouTube channel and your website and your online classes and your Patreon, like why did you want to add a book to all of that kind of content as well?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, books for me are the way I learn things. So it felt very natural for me. It's a way that I learn. It's something that I really connect with. And again, like I said, as much as I love doing workshops, I'm not the best public speaker. So for me, having the space to write the instructions down and show things visually, I think it was really important to me to be able to do that. And when I made those kits, those first booklets, there was just so much I wanted to say, and it just felt like there was enough for a book in there. Yeah, and I think I wanted as well, the other thing I really wanted to try and do with the book is give it the space to be a sewing book, but one that does also have an activist side to it. You know, there are lots of reasons that people choose to mend, but because I was coming at it from such an eco, point of view that I wanted to reduce my waste, I wanted that to be acknowledged in there as well. I didn't want it to just end up in a sewing book pile where it's just like, oh, that's just a craft for women to do and get lumped into that category. I wanted it to be something that would make people feel empowered to give mending a go and to, again, bring that connection back to why we're doing it.
Yeah, but I think the design is really good as well. Like, it's been really well designed. It doesn't have that kind of stereotypically feminine kind of, this is craftsy.
I feel like we should say we're both having to do quote marks here because
you can't see the inverted.
You don't want to have to say that in it, and it's not a negative thing at all. It's just that it unfortunately they can get lumped into that category and lost because of it, which is a shame. But I was very, very lucky with the publishers, and I knew the art director is someone that I knew from university. He was on a different course to me, but that was really lovely because he gave me a voice with it and gave me an input. And like there's a couple of illustrations dotted throughout of just arrows and needles and threads and things like that, and they're all my drawings. And that was just something he'd emailed me and said, I think it needs something of yours in it, and that was really nice. I feel like he really, really listened to what I thought. And even just, like there's a picture of the woods at the beginning in the sustainability bit. That's just one of my photos because I'm very lucky that my local dog walk is Longleat Forest. So just things like that, it did make it feel like it was really a piece of me, which is nice. Yeah.
Cool. Right, so let's get stuck into some questions submitted by some of the lovely Check Your Thread patrons. So unsurprisingly, as we were saying before, most of these questions are about knitwear because the majority, but certainly not all, of the Check Your Thread listeners are predominantly coming from an angle of garment sewing. So whether or not they have some knitting knowledge or yarn craft knowledge, that is not where a lot of us come from initially. So that in mind.
Yeah.
So let's start with some of the thicker knitwear kind of questions. So Sharon says, I'm interested in visible mending for knits, sweaters in particular. I'm not a knitter, so the structure always confounds me. I really want to learn how to make the mend look like part of the knit. I've seen so many people do this. So could you please let us know, like, what are our options for mending thicker knits? So when would you deploy Swiss darning versus Scotch darning versus plain weave darning versus honeycomb darning, and what are those things that I just said? And also, is there a difference between, I'm sure there is, like when there's an actual hole and when there's just some like thinning,
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll start at the top. You said Swiss darning. So Swiss darning is the one that took me the longest for me to get my head around. Not sure why, it just did. That's one that I think, from the sounds of it, is the one that, was it Sharon?
Yes.
That Sharon wants to learn if they want to mimic the original structure of the knitwear.
Is that also known as duplicate stitch?
Yeah, so duplicate stitch is when you are just tracing those stitches. There's no hole, you're just tracing over those existing stitches. Swiss darning means that, applies when you're then recreating stitches to cover the hole. That's how I have, learnt it and read it.
Right. So duplicate is when you're literally kind of like, you would use that to kind of, you're tracing over to fill in like a thinning bit, but the original structure's still there. And then the Swiss darning is creating that pattern of yarn.
But I think they're interchangeable. Some people might say that duplicate stitch is what they're using to cover a hole, or Swiss darning is the term that covers all of it. There's so many different kinds of darns that have different names from different people as well.
Sure.
But that's just the way my brain has separated them. Duplicate stitch is you are mimicking the stitches that are already there, and then Swiss darning is covering the hole by recreating those stitches.
Okay.
So my limits with Swiss darning, it's a really good one if you want to recreate the original knit and you want it to be discreet, but also looks great in contrast. My limits to that is the size of the hole. So Swiss darning is very time intensive. I'm not going to darn, a huge elbow hole with Swiss darning. I'm just not. No, don't have time for that. And if I'm mending for other people, no, that's a cost.
Time is money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's great for moth holes, really small moth holes, but chunkier knits especially. I don't think anyone wants to be using Swiss darning on t-shirts or really light, base layers or anything like that. It's not the place for that. What did you say next? Then there
plain
was
weave darning versus honeycomb darning.
So
I think plain weave darning is the kind of darning that we think of when we hear the word darning, isn't it? Like
I would say so.
In and out, in and out.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place for everyone to start. When I do introduction to darning workshops, that's the method we start with, because I think it can be played around with in lots of different ways. You can use it on lots of different garments. You can use it on denim if you really wanted to. You can use it on socks. You can use it on jumpers.
Have you ever used it on the bias so it's a bit stretchier?
Yeah, so when I've done mending on leggings, if I was going to do a darned patch, I would do it on the bias. I think that could be really helpful. Honeycomb darning is really good for the thinner areas that you mentioned when it's not a hole. So honeycomb darning looks really good from both the front and the back, I think, but it's much easier to do if you don't have a hole.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you've got way more things to think about with the tension of the garment if you've got a hole to replace. But if it's just a thinned out area, it's a really, really good technique, I think. So honeycomb darning is basically blanket stitch, but worked in the round. And then there's also scotch darning, which uses blanket stitch kind of to work in back and forth in rows.
Oh.
And scotch darning is one of my favourite kind of darns to do on elbows. If you choose to not patch an elbow, with like your suede or your felt patches, I think scotch darning is a really good one because it's so strong, and it also it kind of looks like crochet or some kind of textured knit. So it's really nice if you've got a textured jumper or something that you want to, you're happy for it to be visible, but you want it to kind of have a nod to it. I think that can be really good.
Nice. When you're doing all these darns, is it best to try and match the kind of yarn that was used in the original garment?
So there's a few different steps.
Different schools of thought.
Exactly, yeah. There's different things. The main thing you want to do, in my opinion, this is just my personal experience. No, I just think everyone's going to have a slightly different approach. So I think the most important thing is to match the weight of the yarn to what it is that you're mending. So not going in with a chunky knit yarn on your socks, because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to work. If you're pulling a thread that is too thick through a thin fabric, you're going to cause more damage, and the repair is just not going to last as long. So the next layer down from that, I think, is to match the fibre content. But that's where maybe people will vary. So I think, say if you've got a jumper that's alpaca wool or something, you're not going to find that exact wool, but as long as you're using a kind of wool thread to mend it, I think that's fine. Even if you really, really can't find anything and you then have to use an acrylic yarn, I personally would rather match the weight of the yarn first, fibre content second. The only thing then is that you're going to have to think about how you wash that garment moving forwards. So, if you've got an acrylic blend jumper and you mend it with an 100% wool yarn, next time you wash that, the darn is going to felt. So yeah, a few things to think about. But I think from what I've learned from people at workshops, that's the biggest hurdle, is that historically they've tried darning or mending and they've come at it with the wrong kind of thread, and they've just come across more barriers, and then it frustrates you, and then you don't want to give it, you don't want to carry on.
Yeah. So what kind of darn do you get from the little speed weave gadget that brought you into all of this?
So that would be a plain weave darn. You can, you can mix it up. You could do a twill weave or a herringbone weave or something. But that is just going to give you a plain weave. So all that gadget does is it sets up your warp threads a little more easily, and arguably not even more easily, because you've then got to sew those in when you finish the darn. So it's one of those things that back in the 40s it would have been a real technological advancement, but it's definitely not necessary. I think that's the other thing I love about darning, is that really you do just need a needle and thread. All the other tools are just nice to haves, not need to haves.
And Yona would also like to hear about darning and Swiss darning, and whether or not you have any tips on getting the tension right, or is that just a case of practice?
I think practice is going to be a huge answer with all of these things. Swiss darning is a really tricky one with tension. It depends on the technique you use. So with Swiss darning, you can use pins that you place into a piece of foam underneath the garment, and then you build up your new stitches around those pins. Or you can have scaffolding stitches which hold it all in place, and then you create your new stitches around those threads. I personally find using the pins easier for getting the right tension. But I think another thing that's worth doing, with any kind of hole, if you're using Swiss darning, you still want to have those duplicate stitches on the surrounding area of the fabric. And maybe if you're struggling with tension, just add in a few more rows of duplicate stitch first, because you're then going to get a feel for the tension of those stitches.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I have a question for you at the end.
Okay.
And it's relevant. Anyway, right, so let's get into slightly lighter weight knitwear. So I've got two questions I'm going to read at the same time. So from Peggy. Peggy says, I'd love advice on invisibly fixing the thinner armpits of my beloved lightweight cashmere turtleneck. No holes yet, but it's black and I'm not, so the area shows pale when I raise my arms, waving saying goodbye, going to hug someone, getting my hair out of my eyes, adjusting my hat or glasses. I love that Peggy's given that little extra picture of what's going on here. Any techniques on know-how or how to find the right gauge mending yarn to invisibly fix a store-bought garment? And Rinka says, I'd love to know how best to repair super lightweight knit fabric like wool, baby grows or merino base layer, so probably the same kind of fabric. Should Rinka try needle felting or darning or just stitch the hole shut?
Okay, so with the cashmere, the underarms, one of the things that I've found with underarm darning or patching of any kind is to never patch over the seam. So even if it's like it looks like it's one area of damage, I wouldn't do one darn that then goes across those, the sleeve and the side seam, because I think it can put more strain on the garment because you then can't move around in the way that you were before.
Okay.
So you kind of want to, when you're darning, you want your garment to then be able to behave in the way it always did. So for me, with an underarm seam, that's 4 different sections, 4 different darns to do. And I don't know, that's just what I've found over the years from garments that I've worn myself and then mended for other people. I think if it's just one hole right in the centre of that cross seam, that's fine. That if it is that all 4, sections have started to wear thin, I think tackling them as 4 separate darns can be better.
So what technique would you use?
I'd probably use a plain weave darn, but just having 4 of them. And I think, again, with a cashmere jumper, just making sure that you match the weight of the yarn that you use to mend it. Yeah, and you can, with a plain weave darn, you can just have your warp and your weft threads. So your warp threads that run up vertically, and then you weave in your weft threads. But you can also add a series of running stitches all around those to add more strength. Basically, every stitch you add is going to be a bit more strength added to the garment. So it doesn't have to be this, huge darned patch. Just those running stitches themselves will add a bit of strength.
Brilliant. Have you tried needle felting on lightweight?
I have. I haven't got much experience with it because I don't have the tools for it. I think it can be helpful, but I think with really light base layers, it can affect the movement of them. But again, it will depend on where the damage is. If it is just, on the main body somewhere, then that's fine. It's not going to cause any damage. I think with base layers, they get those tiny annoying snags in them, don't they? They're so frustrating and they happen quite a lot. I have a method of darning t-shirts and leggings and things like that where I've got loads of really, really well past it garments that I'll cut up and use as patch fabrics, and I'll just have a tiny patch underneath the garment and then use an open back stitch to just stitch around the hole. So that's actually in the t-shirts chapter in the book.
Right.
So it's like
back stitch.
So it's just back stitch but leaving a gap between the stitches, and it just gives a bit more, I think it helps to keep the stretch in the garment, but it's really strong.
What I'm getting from this is lots of what we term as sacrificial garments.
Yes, sacrificial garments are essential.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so here's another sort of stretch fabric repair question from Andrea. Andrea's asking, is there any way to rescue the frayed cuffs on a leather jacket? So I'm guessing maybe if they're fraying, then maybe it's maybe one of those jackets that's got like a thick rib knit.
Yeah.
Cuff. I'm
guessing.
I
can't really imagine what fraying leather would look like. So yeah, that makes sense if it was a ribbed cuff. That's actually a really interesting one. I've done a lot of cuff repairs for people where those kind of ribbed cuffs get so far gone that you can just buy replacements. So my haberdashery actually sell them, that you can then just replace the whole thing. If it doesn't need replacing to that extent, again, I think, so this is in the book, what you can do is, so there's a fine knit variation where you basically fold the cuff edge back on itself to kind of open it out, and that means that you then give yourself a flat surface area to darn on. That's the thing I found most helpful with those really fine cuffs if you want to darn it. Yeah,
that's really clever. Yeah. So you're getting in there.
And that's actually what I need to do on this jumper. Just taking a look at it now. It's definitely time. Yeah. Maybe, this is going to be one maybe that I'll film, so.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, so have a look on Skye's YouTube channel. You might get the tutorial up very soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. So here's 2 questions about jersey. So Charlie asks for tips. Charlie says, I keep getting those small holes on t-shirts, almost too small to patch, but big enough that they need some reinforcement. That sounds like we might have already covered that. And then Serena says, I love Skye's work. Yay!
Oh, yay, thank you.
I'm sure it will be an excellent conversation. Well, let's hope. My question is about jersey or light French terry garments, especially my kids' leggings and t-shirts. What are the options for thinning fabric that starts to develop holes? My go-to approach is patching. Yes, me too. But would love to hear some other options.
I mean, I think, to be honest, patching's your best bet because it's the quickest way, it's the strongest way, especially with kids who, I've mended so many kids' leggings where it's the knees, and the patch is just, it's the most fun for them. I did some leggings for a girl last year, and I think it was 3 pairs, and we basically went with a really thin wool felt, which feels like it should be quite bulky for her leggings, but it was what she needed because she was so hard on them, and she picked a different shape for every knee, and it was, it's fun, it's quick, you just use a blanket stitch or a whip stitch to secure them, and I think, the most efficient way.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily have to match the thickness of the patch fabric to the original garment.
So
fabric.
I would normally say yes, but I think when it's high stress areas like knees or elbows, like those traditional suede elbow patches and things.
I guess they were like that for a reason.
They're there for a reason, because as much as I think it should also be normalised that we will always have to mend on men's, I think that's perfectly fine. And if something's worn out and you've mended it, the chances are that it's worn out there because it's a high stress area, so it's just going to happen again and you'll have to re-mend it. But I think, knees and elbows are probably my exceptions, where I just think if you're going to use something a bit thicker, that's the time to do it.
Yeah, perfect. But if it's a stretch garment, go with a stretch patch. We don't want to cross the beams in that way.
Yeah. And I think if it's thinning areas and you really did want to try darning, honeycomb darning's the one to use there. Because it's nice and stretchy. I really want to try honeycomb darning. I've not tried it yet, but it really looks good. So cool. Yeah, it's really, really fun. And it does look good from both sides. So you can play around with that. So if
you were doing honeycomb darning, say on a pair of kids' leggings, or possibly maybe like a thinner weight sock, what yarn would you use for the honeycomb darn?
Well, so again, I think people will probably be annoyed by this, but I still stand by it. I recommend embroidery floss to a lot of people for many reasons, because it's cheap, it's mostly, always check the labels, but mostly it is 100% cotton, and you can split the strands down to match whatever weight you need, so you've kind of got a 6-in-1 thread, which is great if you're just starting out and you don't want to go out and buy a whole new toolbox of threads.
Why is that controversial, by the way? Because it sounds perfect advice to me.
Well, I think it has a bit of a sheen to it, so I think some people are just like, it just doesn't look as nice as a wool thread or whatever it is. But I just think, or maybe it's not as hard wearing as the fact that it's stranded and you can split down the weight means that even if you use all 6 strands, that's not going to be as strong as a twisted, like a sashiko cotton, for example, is super strong. So maybe there's a bit of that in it. But I think it works so well so much of the time, and that's what I use for a lot of socks. If I don't, if it's just a normal pair of cotton socks, then that works for me.
And you can get it in so many colours, can't you? So
exactly. Yeah,
if you
can
wanted
really
to make it blend in, or you deliberately wanted to make it more of a feature, like that's easily done, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's a really good springboard. If you don't know anything else about the world of threads, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and most people have got them knocking around.
Yes, and if not, you can go into any charity shop and find a bundle. I don't think I've ever been into a charity shop and not seen a bag of embroidery threads.
So many kind of abandoned cross-stitch projects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we've got another really good question, the last one from the patrons. Katie brings up a really good kind of general visible mending kind of topic, and that is about placement. So Katie says, I know how to visibly mend holes in lightweight knitwear, but often they are in random places or odd areas. My answer in the past has always been to sort of sprinkle embellishments over the shirt, one of which is the secret mend, but this is pretty time consuming. So I guess, do you have any ideas or suggestions for getting a good repair without it becoming like a massive art project that you It's just going to eat up loads and loads of time.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really great question, because I think the other thing that happens and that people will say to me a lot is, oh, but you do this as a job. Why have you mended that invisibly or quickly or whatever it is if I've chosen not to make something a big art project? But again, none of us have the time for that for every single garment. It's not always the way. And it sounds like that is a really good approach, you know. Sometimes you do just have to do a quick stitch repair and it's in a matching thread and no one needs to know it was there. I think maybe the decision there is that you choose to make the art projects the garments that you really love and that you know you want to spend that time on. You know, if it's just a t-shirt that you've snagged on the door handle as you've left the room or something, I'm with you. No one has the time to sit.
Yeah, you went past a blackberry bush or something.
Yeah, exactly. No one's got the time to sit and design a whole concept for that. You just want to get it repaired. And I think that is the other thing. You know, there's a stitch in time saves 9 is a quote for a reason. It is way better if you can get to that damage as soon as it happens before it stretches and grows. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to then turn it into a big, huge, visible project. It can just be a quick and dirty repair, I think.
I love it. Yes, thank you for giving us permission.
Definitely.
So, my last question for you is a very selfish one.
Okay.
I'm showing you my bed sock.
Oh.
So this is a lovely hand knit sock.
Yeah.
I can't knit properly yet.
Okay.
I can't knit socks yet. I've tried twice and given up. But my mum very sweetly commissioned these socks for me, I think from somewhere from Etsy. And I love them. They're a kind of a thicker weight yarn. I think probably maybe like an Aran or worsted kind of weight. Anyway, it's got a hole.
Yep. That is a big hole.
It's a big hole. And then the other one, I know I should have stopped wearing them. The other one is kind of thinning in the same place.
Okay.
What would you recommend? And I'm scared you're going to tell me something about scaffolding stitches.
No, I'm not going to tell you. So, you know, I said earlier, Swiss darning has a time and a place. I don't think that time and place is socks.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, no, okay, that's a bit of a generalisation. If they were just a plain stocking knit sock, maybe. But can I just quickly say it again? I want to say it. It's a textured knit for everyone listening. I can't quite tell on camera, but it's a more textured knit than you would want to Swiss darn. I think honeycomb darning is what you want to use there, which is great because that's what you said you wanted to try anyway.
Oh, this is my chance. Okay.
So I have. I wonder if I can quickly show you a photo of some a similar weight, I think, socks that I mended for someone a couple of years ago, and we went with honeycomb darning, and it worked really well for all of her socks. And same thing as you, she had a hole in one and not in the other. Can you see that on the heels? That's honeycomb darning.
Oh, cute. Yeah, that looks really nice.
So I think that's going to be your
maybe I could cut my teeth and practice on the one that's thinning.
Yes, yeah, because I know I said earlier it's easier with thinned fabrics rather than fabrics with holes, but it looks really good on fabrics with holes. Again, in the book, I think I specifically said to them I wanted an example of both in there. So on page 26, you can see the honeycomb darn on the middle bottom picture. That's what it looks like on thinned fabrics, and then the number 11, that's what it looks like when there's a hole. So you can see you just get a more dense finish.
Yeah, awesome. What yarn am I using?
What is it? Are they wool socks?
Yeah.
Anything that you've got of a similar weight. If you use a darning yarn, so like the Scanfil, for example, is a really common one. I personally, if this is the colour that someone has asked for, I will double that up until it's the right thickness. I will triple it up until it's the right thickness. I don't think there's any problem with doing that.
That's a good tip.
If you need that to get, to achieve the right thickness.
Okay. So I'm doubling or tripling up till it is an equivalent thickness to the original yarn.
Yeah, as much as you can do. It's not going to be an exact match every time. You basically just want, the limits to that would be do a few test stitches, and as long as your needle is pulling through the sock and it's not getting caught or snagging or feeling like you're dragging those stitches, then that's normally a good sign.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have until this episode goes out to give it a go.
That's a good deadline. Everyone's going to want to see your answer.
I know. I've created myself some outer accountability now, haven't I? Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Oh, I could talk to you forever. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Where can people find you and how can they learn from you?
Wow, thank you for having me, first of all. It's been really, really fun. People can find me on my website, so slowstitch.club, and I have a Patreon, same thing, Slow Stitch Club, and I have YouTube as well. I've got quite a few workshops coming up. I've got a mix of in-person ones in Frome and online ones as well if you're located somewhere else. Yeah, I think that's everywhere. Instagram as well.
Brilliant. So it's all the details of all your workshops are online. And I heartily recommend people check out your YouTube as well, because your videos are excellent.
Thank you. I mean, the world of video editing is a big stress for me this year. It's hard. It is really hard when you don't know anything about it. But I'm a very visual learner, and I know that a lot of other people are. So it's definitely something I want to be able to offer people.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!